even after I knew about boundaries, it took me a long time to realize, actually, it's actually nothing to do with other people. The entry point to these reinventions of yourself is the awareness that this version of me that I am is not happy, and it is not thriving, and is not flourishing, even though I have a good life.
But everyone wants you to stay there. And then there's the comments of, she must be depressed. And I'm like, no, I'm just me.
When my bullshit radar got stronger and stronger, I thought, I need to pay attention to this. This is my intuitive self telling me that this person is not good for me. The next thing comes out of the next you.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a massive discovery in my life.
The big silence, empowering personal experiences, inspiring compassion, and healing lives. We are no longer silent. We are here.
The Big Silence. The Big Silence.
All right, welcome to the Big Silence podcast. Paul Scanlon, how are you?
Hey, I'm good, Karena. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I was so excited when your people talk to my people, and we're like,
Yeah.
podcast is like, I've been following you on Instagram and listening to your podcast for quite some time, because everything you talk about, it really hits me here in the heart with the experiences I've had and traumas, the boundaries, communication skills, and all the things that I'm still working on to this day.
Yeah.
You would be a fabulous guest for everyone here.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. So you're a mentor, educator, motivational speaker for over 30 years. And I was trying to dive deep into, how did you get to this place? And I feel like possibly it was your childhood and the traumas of your childhood. Can we talk about that and your father?
Yeah, I don't know that I wasn't consciously aware of that till more recent years, like lots of people aren't, when you put together cause and effect in your life of things that are creating who you have become and don't want to stay in that version of you, but don't know how to get unstuck because you don't know what got you stuck. That's been me most of my life. I think in my late 30s, early 40s, I turned 67 last week. So in my early 40s, I think I had what I call now a series of awakenings. It's not language I had then. One of the most frustrating things, I think, for people in our world and in this space is that the language for what we're experiencing comes later. So the experience lacks language.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't find anyone who can language what you're experiencing, you don't know you're having an awakening. But I did in my early 40s. And so I think a series of awakenings, which were degrees of coming back home to myself, helped me to reconnect with a part of me that I've been separated from, I think, since childhood, which was the real authentic version of me. And in the last 25 plus years, I suppose, I have been working to release that version of me more and more, to understand who I am and why I'm here. So I've been in that work now and that journey for 25 plus years. And only in recent years, when I wrote a book called I Am Not My Father, as you alluded to, and I've been estranged from my father all my life. I have 6 siblings, and we all scattered in our teens because of him and his violence. He was a violent alcoholic and so on. So I left home when I was 16. But when I was writing the book, I'm Not My Father, in recent years, that's when I realized how triggering it was. And this version of me has learned to lean into that with curiosity. Older versions of me did not do that. But because I've taught myself to be curious about pain that comes up, I figured out, there are a lot of things in my life that are rooted in what I only called trauma then. I've never used the word trauma for me. Trauma feels a dramatic word to use when you see people in real trauma. like going on in parts of the world now, in Palestine and so on. You think, I'm not going to use the word trauma about me. Hell no.
Hmm.
But I made peace with the word, and I thought that's probably what it really is. So I put that together in recent years, yeah.
Wow. So first question, what's your birthday?
My birthday was 23rd of March.
Okay, I'm March 22nd. So
There you go. So we are in that Aries
yeah.
space. Yeah, yeah.
So I know you've used the quote, blood is not thicker than your mental health.
Yeah.
And so, my mother, and you're not communicating with your father anymore. Was in the other sector of becoming, my mother was schizophrenic, and I was becoming her caretaker the last 5 years of her life. And she has since passed since 2021. And I'm still working through that trauma now. And I'm 43 now. And I've done a lot of work. But I think it's so important to point out that, so did you start doing your work with the big T in your 40s then?
Yeah. I know it was in my 40s that I began to wake up to the awareness of me not being version of me that I wanted to be, me not being comfortable in my own skin, me being other people's idea of me, and feeling the control and the containment and the limitation of all of that, and becoming curious about it and figuring out this is who I don't want to be. And, the classic language of midlife crisis starts get thrown around. But I don't think midlife crisis is a crisis. The word crisis suggests it can be fixed and identified like a problem, but it's not. It's far more nuanced than that. I think a better language is midlife unraveling. That's what I think happens in midlife. And that's what was happening for me, I think, in early 40s.
And so what was your first step when you realized you had this midlife unraveling and you had this aha moment? What was your first step?
I think getting still. I think teaching myself to create space internally between an awareness of something's wrong and then doing knee-jerk things to fix it, or even overshare about it in an attempt to soothe or fix it or comfort it. I began to learn to get still. It was in my early 40s. I kind of came out of the closet. It felt like a version of that as an introvert.
Mm-hmm.
It was like difficult to own up to being an introvert because I've been surrounded by extroverts all my life, dragged to parties all my life.
Same.
I'm like, what the hell? And you go because you want to socially fit in and, not create an issue, but it was draining and exhausting. So the awareness of that, even in my early 40s, that seems to have come late to me, was an awakening. So with the realization that I was introverted and being more open about that, I began to do things that introverts do, which was to get still, get silent, get away from people, get away from phones. And I think in that new energy I was finding, I began to be aware of these awakenings. And these awakenings, I suppose, led me to voices, people, places, who, when I listened to them, made me feel seen.
Mm-hmm.
And to a degree understood. There were very few voices back then, of course, that are far more now available, like you and I, thank God, out there. But still, I think when I mentor people one-on-one particularly, very often they say to me, wow, I wish I'd found you years ago. Where you been all my life? Meaning it's still not easy to find someone that does what we do. Yeah. And I know therapy is much more mainstream in people's options in America than it certainly is in England or Europe. It still feels here like a cottage industry to do what I do. And for people to turn to some version of a therapist or a psychologist. But even with that being true, I think what we do still is quite marginalized and viewed with skepticism by more mainstream approaches to helping people. So back when I was, 25 years ago, there was very little voices I could find. And that's one of the reasons I'm in this space, because I thought, let me increase the number of people that are in this space, because I needed you 25 years ago, but I couldn't find those people.
For me to have the big silence, it's the things that people don't want to talk about. Even now, even though 25, 30 years ago, you start talking about it, now it still is stigmatized, but you just keep doing the work. And I realize when people share their stories, or you can give them some hope, like we're little by little helping the world be a better place.
Right, exactly.
And yeah, I'm still here trying to end the stigma, but I want to talk about something you mentioned, your abusive father, and you have talked before about abandonment issues. And I think a lot of listeners, whether there's, someone admits to it or not, there is that. And I know me personally, with my mother being in and out of the house, missing persons and such, I had abandonment issues. I couldn't, it took me a long time to love again and trust again. And think I have a wonderful husband who we've been together almost 12 years now. But can we talk about that?
Yeah, again, I don't think I had the language of abandonment when I would have welcomed that language to my life.
Right.
This is why I think what we do is so important. I think it's Brene Brown that speaks about shame, particularly. She specialized in research in shame, as you know, and our listeners and watchers may be aware of. But the idea, she realized that once shame, for instance, is languaged, you drag it into the light, and it thrives, of course, in shade and shadow and darkness, does shame. And curiosity has the effect of shedding light on things that thrive in darkness, is what I realized. Mm-hmm. So for me to be aware of this abandonment thing led me on a search for what are the component parts of that, which took me to the awareness of attachment styles. Mm-hmm. And books and so on in that space. And I realized that, of course, I had an anxious attachment style, which deepened my sense of ongoing abandonment with people who weren't abandoning me. The problem became my attachment style rather than abandonment, because my attachment style made me easy to feel abandoned by people that were just loving me the best they could. But my anxious attachment style gave me a misreading and a misjudging of their behaviors. So I knew I had work to do around that. And when I worked, and I'm working on my anxious attachment style to move it to more a secure attachment style, I have had less awareness of feeling abandoned and less issues with that. I don't think other people have changed, therefore. I think I have changed to make that more realistic in my life, in my reading of people's behavior. And I think the final thing I'd say about this, Karena, and to everybody listening and watching, is I'm in this place now where I realize you can't abandon me. No one can abandon me or you, because that's my job. Only I can abandon me. And I'm never going to do that. It's taken me years to come to that realization. I know that's said very shortly and briefly, but it's massive to me. I think I've earned that in the last 2 decades, that I have no fear now of abandonment anymore, because I realized the greatest abandonment, of course, was abandoning myself to other people's validation of me, or other people's inclusion of me, or love of me. And so I am enabling the abandonment dance by my allowing you to abandon me and me feel abandoned. And since I've come home more to me and made my home more in me, it is impossible to abandon me now. You can desert me, you can ghost me, you can not call me back, you cannot include me, but you can't abandon me, I think, is where I've come to now with all that.
Ooh, yeah, that's beautifully said. I would say, first, I do want to explain to the listeners what abandonment styles are. And then I love what you just said, because I think that takes us into what boundaries are as well.
Right.
And even, my own abandonment style, probably similar to what yours was, and still going through abandonment stuff from maybe past, mother, past friendships, business relationships, uh,
Mm.
and working through that. But I'm going to take what you just said and be like, no one can abandon me.
Mm.
So let's talk about what attachment styles are.
Yeah, well, there's lots of books out there about that and voices about that. And so I'd encourage people to Google it and dip in wherever you want to. But, the basic attachment styles of anxious and avoidant and secure, and a new one that's been added called disorganized, which is a mixture of them all. It's a bit like the Enneagram, the Myers-Briggs profiling of your personality. I suppose it's the version of that with regard to your attachment style as a human, all of which was established in your nurture when you were born and in your early childhood. The theory of attachment style is it came from there. So, of course, with your situation, with your mom that you described, and with mine, without describing just my dad for starters, never mind my mom and the home we were in, it's obvious my attachment style would become a combination of anxious and avoidant. There was no secure love at all in my childhood, and I don't think generationally in our family. I have softened towards my abusive father in the last years, because I realize he probably didn't have any better in his relationship with his dad. I didn't know my granddad, his dad, but I'm sure, reading between the lines, my dad also suffered abuse from his dad and became monkey see, monkey do, and passed on all of that nonsense and that abuse, because my dad never found the wherewithal to say, not on my watch, like I did. The reason I wrote the book, I'm Not My Father, was to take a stand against generational patterns that repeat themselves, which they do, when there's no resistance against that happening. So I said no to all of that in all the ways I could in my awakenings in my early 40s, and then woke up to the awareness that this in me is called an attachment style. I'd never heard of that. Mm-hmm. So I'm fascinated by the possibility that I could find something of myself in that language, and I didn't realize my attachment style was anxious. And all of this, can be researched and Googled. It's well known now, I suppose, or better known, to figure out which one of those best describes you, and then what can you do to work towards a more secure attachment style? Because, most humans, of course, statistically, are avoidant or anxious. They're not secure because we were not raised in secure homes.
I love that. We're going to do a blog post on thebigsilence.com about attachment styles. So yeah, that's a good one. So let's go and talk about boundaries. This is one of my favorite topics, because I probably started learning about boundaries only 7 years ago. And you speak really well. You say mental, you talk about the mental, relational health and feeling safe within boundaries and why we create them. And I think it's important. A lot of people feel like creating boundaries, they feel guilty, but that is not true. And I love the quote that you've said before on your podcast: if the relationship doesn't survive the boundaries, what did you really even have?
Yeah, well, I was a late comer to the whole idea of boundaries too. And again, I think, maybe we and I missed the party altogether where everybody knew about it. And they're like, oh yeah, we don't know about that for years. Well, I didn't and you didn't. Yeah. So I'm glad it's becoming a more mainstream idea and language now to describe this dynamic in relationships where we need to create space between ourselves and people who are not treating us well, or not loving us like we want to be, or are constantly overriding how we want to be treated and experienced, and so on and so on. So for me, having none in my family, like you probably didn't in my biological family, we had no boundaries. Mm-hmm. And then spending years in the church world where we had no boundaries, I think drove me eventually towards this awareness of whatever it is that's missing, that's making me frustrated and driving me crazy with all this enmeshment of everybody's lives. I need to find out what that is. And what that is was boundaries. And so I became a student of that in my life and other people's lives. And in this last 10 years or so, I think, like for you, I have become much more proactive and try to get better and more skillful at identifying what boundaries I need, how to set them, how to maintain them, how to protect them. And one of the big wake-ups for me was, I think, with it, or Karena, was boundaries are not about other people. Mm-hmm. It took me a long time to realize that even after I knew about boundaries, it took me a long time to realize, actually, it's actually nothing to do with other people. But because I was so troubled by other people's responses to my boundaries, their energy of resistance made me think I have to keep dialing it down or adjusting it until they're okay with it. Mm-hmm. Until I realized they're never going to be okay. They'll never be okay with some of my boundaries. And that's why I said the quote you made, people that are never okay with you saying to them, please don't treat me like this, or please don't do this anymore. Or if you do, I'm going to, not hang around with you, or not be in that WhatsApp friendship group, or I'm not going to be in a conversation with you because all the time you're gossiping about people. I won't put it with it anymore. Whatever boundary it is, I realize some people are never, ever going to be okay with that. And they always put it back on you as being, ungrateful or rude or disrespectful or having a breakdown or you're angry or whatever. So when I realized it was protecting me and my own mental and emotional health, I got much better at setting boundaries and stopped giving a shit what people thought.
I love that. Yeah, with boundaries, when I learned how to say no, I realized, and what you said, like what did you really even have? It comes up pretty quickly. And I've, lost friendships by saying no. I don't want to go to that party. I'm an introvert. I don't want to go to this. And it's not being desensitive like to them or, they take it personally. But I realized that then perhaps I was in a toxic relationship and the energy that I was feeling I was like, wow, this maybe isn't a good relationship for me. So now I really try to protect myself and the energy of people around me. So can you talk more about energies and toxic relationships and then healing from them and how long it takes? Can you heal from them?
Sometimes the first indication that you have about the need to set a boundary is an energy awareness, because sometimes you are not aware of why the boundary, why your space feels violated, why you feel unseen or taken for granted or mistreated. Sometimes it's hard to language that, but you feel it. And because we feel it but can't language it, we just keep putting up with it. So I made friends with my energy radar and started to trust it more. So when my bullshit radar got stronger and stronger, I thought, I need to pay attention to this. This is my intuitive self telling me that this person is not good for me. This energy is not good for me. And so I began to be curious about that rather than have other people talk me out of that. Other people explain that away. I thought, no, that is how I am. That's how I'm wired. I do not want to be around those energies. So I had an awareness of something's off with this person before I had an idea of how I might speak to them about it. And I want to encourage people to do that, to be curious and to trust their energy radars as an entry point to this boundary space, because you might not know what it is about that person that does your head in, but you do know that do your head in. So this allergic reaction you have to the drama that someone brings into your life needs to be paid attention to, because drama is not neutral, and drama in a prolonged way is not neutral. It will kill you. So to ignore that because they're a nice person, and that's what I used to do. you know, she's a nice person and she's got a great sense of humor and makes us all laugh. Yeah, but she's also a drama queen, or it may be a drama king, because guys can do it as well. So what I did was I allowed the drama to stay because they were a likable person. And I think that's what lots of people do. So we keep the person in our lives because they're a nice person or they've been friends with us for 10 years, unaware that what comes with that is stuff that's killing us. So I realized that I had to separate these people out and start to say, I love you, all these great things about you, but if we can't talk about this bit of you, and if you can't adjust that around me, then it doesn't matter how much I like you, how long we've been friends. We're going to have to start reducing our connection, fading our friendship, or cutting contact altogether.
Yeah. And I like what you've said, and many people have said this, that people in your life are a time, a season, a reason.
Yeah,
And, sometimes we hold on too long. And
right.
I think that's
Which can be attachment styles. Again, if you're anxious, you're not going to let go of people. And that's the other thing that we need to put into the boundaries conversation. Sometimes we don't set a boundary because our anxious attachment style is making us stay connected to people because of an anxiety that we will lose them and feel abandoned. So we don't set a boundary because our anxious attachment style makes us stay connected to people who are bad for us.
Yep, been there.
Yeah,
but working on that, working to my secure attachment style.
Me too. Yeah.
I would say everyone in my life now is good, and I've got my bullshit radar out.
That's great. Yeah. Right.
I know from, when you grow up a certain way and how your attachment style that you develop. So I want to talk about new versions in self. You're so good about talking about growing and learning, and I am a big believer that we all should change. And then there's the people who are like, you've changed so much. I'm like, well, yeah. And I'm proud of the woman I've become, proud of the changes I've made and the growth. So let's talk about that.
I think the entry point to all this is going back to awareness, the awareness that I'm not happy, I'm not fulfilled, and yet I feel bad about that because I have a great life. Often people have a great life, but they're very unhappy. And we have lots of examples of high-profile movie star people and so on that we think, what? They had a great life. And then we find out they've got a massive addiction problem, which, of course, as we know, all addictions are to mask pain. But we envy their lives and then realize, when we realize their lives are miserable, that it's true for us too. That the dream life we think we want does not come with happiness and joy included. You have to find that by yourself. So I think the entry point to these reinventions of yourself is the awareness that this version of me that I am is not happy, and it is not thriving, and it is not flourishing, even though I have a good life. And what I think we've done for generations is settled for, you know what, I don't want to be ungrateful. I've got a good home, a good family, a good job, and so on and so on, and sort of concreted over the fact that our soul is dying. So when I came into the awareness of what I'm describing now, I decided to do something about that. And people have a choice at that point, at that crossroads. Do you go back into your good life and remain unhappy? And I know lots of people do that. Doesn't make them bad people. I decided not to do that. And to be honest, going back and being happy with what you've got, making the best of it, though you know this is not the best version of me, there's a lot to be said for the peace that gives you. Because the moment you start saying, I'm not going to do this, I'm going to wake up, I'm going to aspire for bigger things, I'm going to change my job, I'm going to set boundaries, change my relational life, I'm going to become more tuned into my energies, I'm going to come home to myself. When you start doing that, all hell breaks loose with people who don't want you to change. And the most difficult people in your life when you change or want to change are the people you've known the longest. Because if I've known you for, 10 years and I start talking about things that disrupt our relationship and make you think, what? You reading what book? You talk to who? You seeing a therapist? What about what? You setting up, if you start doing all of that and I start setting boundaries and speaking my truth and being me, this next version of me, all hell breaks loose with people who like you to stay as you were, because that's what they're doing. Even when, some years ago, Karena, I grew my hair long and tied it up into a man bun, you wouldn't believe the sort of sarcastic, cynical, sort of playful, stroke teasing, but stroke serious comments I got about my appearance. Because I'd never grown my hair long. I colored my hair for years and I just surrendered to the gray. I never had a beard. So when I started to grow a beard and grew my hair and tied it up one day, it was like, you look like a drug dealer. It's like Miami Vice, or you're having a midlife crisis, and so on and so on. This is from people who love me.
Yeah.
So my point being that even that, changing your glasses, changing your clothing, changing your hairstyle, even that can so rock the boat that it scares the hell out of you from attempting something more deeper than that. I'm
going to talk about this too, because I've had a community of women for 15 years. And I always had like beach babe waves, we call it. And it was extensions. And then I decided I don't want extensions anymore. I want to just have natural hair. And I'm very casual. I get dolled up when I go to events, but it was like this shock. It was a shock. Like, what is wrong with her? I'm like, I'm just living my next version of self and loving myself and doing what I want to do and who I want to be, and not going to get a spray tan all the time. It was like different. That was so long ago. But everyone wants you to stay there. And then there's the comments of, she must be depressed. She's this. And I'm like, no, I'm just me. And by the way, I love the man bun. My husband has a man bun as well. But yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And new versions of self should be praised and growth and, over the years. And so thank you for bringing that up.
And I think too, in some cultures, change is anti-cultural. It's not just the culture perhaps of your family, but the culture of the country you're in. So when I'm in Eastern cultures, and speak to young people about being themselves and aspiring for the kind of life they want, many of them are stuck in this obligation to carry on in the family business generationally. It's how the culture is built for generations. So if they don't want to be involved in, the clothing industry or wherever it might be, but they want to do something else that really lights them up, which I'm encouraging people to do, they're dealing with a massive cultural resistance to that, let alone resistance in people close to them who feel threatened by it. So that's also going on in different cultures over the world and different groups within society that have cultural resistance to changing your appearance or changing the company you keep or reading a different kind of book or going to a different kind of school or having different friends or shopping at a different store or whatever it may be. Even those things can be so disruptive in families that no one attempts to go deeper, like we're talking about here now, because there was so much drama over, changing your hairstyle, as you just said, or changing something else that should really be cosmetic. People get very threatened by it. And so I understand, and I want people to feel seen by this conversation, that we understand that what we're saying isn't easy. And you and I did not find this easy and still don't. And we want people to know that we're not here saying, it was easy it was difficult for all these reasons that we need to give language to. But still, if I had my term over again, and you did, Would we do this again? Hell yeah.
Oh,
We
yeah.
would. Hell yeah. Maybe we do it better. And there's more help now, thank God, for people. And that's why I'm so glad for what you do, that people can find your voice and listen to you and read your book and find another person that sees them. That's got to be narrowing the odds against people staying stuck these days when there's more awareness around this, like we're doing today.
Yeah. And my hope is that someone listens to this and it's their first push to become unstuck. And, it's
Yeah.
not, I love the community that we've built through Tone It Up, but as we give them grace to come and grow, I deserve the same grace as well.
Yeah. And I think it's important to say to people, too, I've learned this over my life, especially in transitions in my life between versions of me and between jobs or roles and so on and so on. The next thing comes out of the next you.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a massive discovery in my life that lots of us are running to the next thing all the time. And that thing can be a person, a relationship, a job, a role, a town, a city, a relocation. But why I said earlier about I learned to slow down and be still, in that stillness that I began to get good at, especially through the celebrating and owning of my introversion, in that space I created for myself internally, I realized that I need to stop running from thing to thing to thing and start to focus more on who I want to be next. Because if I start jumping to the next thing and I'm not aware of this next thing really doesn't align with who I was becoming, that next thing sets me back. And I mentor a lot of people one-on-one around this area that are transitioning in career. And I'll say to them, well, hang on, I know you've got 5 job offers, but can I ask you, I know you've done this for 20 years, can I ask you, is this what you want to do? Because it sounds to me like this is not what you want to do. It sounds to me like there's another version of you waking up that would like to do very different things. Is that true? Well, oh yeah, but financially and my pension and all that. I say, yeah, okay, well, you could just go ahead then and do the next thing available to you that may appeal to your ego to step into that new role, more money, more power, and so on, and responsibility. But it will add another layer of unhappiness to your life. And you are now, 45, 40, 48, 50. Do you want that? And that's what I'm trying to say to people. If you want to age well, start thinking early, who am I becoming? Mm-hmm. And then what you do next needs to align with that next version of you. So the next thing should come out of the next you, not the other way around.
I love that. I love that. So I want to talk about, so you just turned 67 and you're in the best shape of your life. I'm turning this around. I want to talk about that. And because I feel, obviously, coming from the fitness industry and new versions of you, career, mental, physical growth, and let's talk about that journey for you.
Well, I think, again, one of my awakenings in my early 40s was about aging well, because I saw people around me that were older than me were not aging well. Mm-hmm. And I became a student of why that was. And it was to do with what we've talked about earlier. It was to do with living lives that didn't have boundaries. It was to do with not paying attention to negative energies that were constantly in their world, that were aging them emotionally, and that were troubling them mentally. And they lived with it. And they stayed in bad relationships. And they stayed in jobs they hated. And they had poor relationship with food and with fitness and health. And so I watched that. And so I determined in my early 40s to age well in 5 areas: physically, mentally, emotionally, relationally, and generationally. So those became my 5 areas that I determined to take each one and give time and attention to each one. I didn't want to default to going to the gym looking great, but inside I was sick. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to have a gym body, but a crippled mind. Mm-hmm. So I determined that my aging well would be in a more holistic way. And I've been on that now for 27 years, really, I've been working at aging well externally and internally, and it's exhausting.
Why do you
I
find
get it. I get it. I get it. I get defaulting to not doing that. Hell, but I'm addicted to it in the best possible way because of the life it's given me and because I do feel in the best shape of my life. And that is not accidental or coincidental. People in my family have not aged well generationally at all. And so I know that what I started doing 20 plus years ago has given me the life I have now, the health I have now, externally and internally. So yeah, I'm committed to shouting that message. Yeah.
I hear you when you say it's exhausting. It's a lot of work
Sure.
rather than sitting on the couch and
Exactly.
ordering a pizza.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
but
Exactly.
I would imagine that even though it's exhausting that way, mentally and physically, you are thriving and can handle a lot and just live the best life that you can and age well.
Yeah. That's the reward. And that reward starts coming early. I mean, that reward doesn't come 20 years in. I think people feel with working in their internal ecosystem, in their emotional world, for instance, that the rewards are so slow and so hard to spot, unlike a muscle improving in a gym. You can see your body shape changing in the gym, and I get the gratification of that's more instant.
Mhm.
And so I think people feel if I could have that emotionally, then I go to that emotional gym every day.
Mhm.
And so I want to say to people, yeah, but the payoff of that emotional mental gym that you need also to go to, that payoff is far greater in multiple ways than just looking good in a mirror because you work out. That's important too. But if I had to give anything up of my aging well, it would be the gym side of things. It would be the physical side. If I had to give, if you force me with a gun, give one of these up, I wouldn't give up mental or emotional, because what's that handed me in my life has just been magnificent, and it is for everyone. But I know wherever people are starting from listening to us, if you're starting now from where we were years ago, you and I, Karena,
Mhm.
it's like standing at the foot of Mount Everest. It's scary. Where do we start? And that's why we encourage people, small steps are better than no steps. Start small, start somewhere. Don't look for dramatic, don't overdo it because it will overwhelm you. Start small, and all those small incremental things build for a different outcome in your life. And that reward starts sooner than you think. You're going to start feeling it in your life in ways that are going to surprise you. So don't be discouraged. Don't think, well, am I going to see any benefit in this in the first 5 years? Yeah, you're going to see the benefit in the first few weeks of this mental and emotional work.
Yeah, 100%. I always preach the same, like one foot in front of the other,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
keep,
totally.
like, building up. It's not the all or nothing mentality.
Right.
And I believe that when it comes to physical fitness or mental or going to therapy, like,
Yeah.
go do one walk in nature. You already
Yes,
feel
exactly.
that mental benefit.
Right.
And so if you're having a down day, just move your body. It's immediate. Going
Right.
to therapy is when I first started going to therapy again years and years ago, I would drive there and be like, I don't want to do this. I should turn around. And then you do it. And then I'm driving home and I'm like, I can breathe. So small steps.
I was helping someone the other day with the one we're mentoring, and she said to me, as I was walking here, I was tormented with, why am I doing this? I should go back. And just before I left work, she said, I told a friend of mine that I was having this session. And she said to me, what? What are you wasting your time with that for? So those things almost made a turnaround. And this was a person that's been doing a lot of work for a long time. So I know how difficult it is for people to stay in these spaces because there's very few voices around them that get it or support it. And so it's important that you find your tribe who are going to say to you, good, go for it. That's a great thing. Hey, let me pay for that for you almost. as a sign of nudging them towards, empowering them towards that. Those are beautiful moments when you find those people.
Yeah. And I want to say, when you say, let me pay for that, I just want to point out at the Big Silence Foundation, that is one of our programs where
That's
we
great.
provide therapy for all. For those
Wow.
who don't have health insurance or their therapists don't accept health insurance, which is
Great.
very
Well
common.
done.
So you can go to our website and apply for the scholarship for therapy. Just wanted to shout that out because I think it's so
That's
important.
great.
We will
Lovely.
pay for your therapy.
Very
So
fantastic.
it's been
Yep.
amazing talking to you.
Thank you.
We're going to put it all in the show notes, but where can everyone find you?
Social media is Paul Scanlon UK, and that's all they need to know. They can find everything about me through, I'm on, Instagram and Facebook and TikTok. So I'm out there, so we can connect through there. Thank you.
I love it. Thank you for this wonderful conversation. I appreciate you and all of the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much. Much love to you and all the people that are with us today. Thank you.
The big silence. The big silence.